Most of the time, everything you need is right in front of you. Right, I want to talk about why I think that culture is a survival mechanism. So first of all, let me sort of be clear about what I mean when I say the word culture. I'm talking about the way in which we live. Now, some people would associate the word culture with perhaps the arts, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that the arts actually influence the way we live sometimes, especially great works of art. And I think you could say that all art perhaps is an attempt to influence culture, and therefore if you see the shaman as someone who's engineering culture or is trying to influence it, then you could argue that artists and shaman are basically the same thing, and I'm pretty much of that opinion myself. The question of, do artists do things that shamans don't do, or do shamans do things that artists don't do, is still open to discuss. So when I say culture, I mean the way in which we live. On this statement, I think it's pretty obvious why I think that culture is a survival mechanism. However, you could argue that we do lots of things that would appear to have no benefit to our survival, and also we do lots of things which would appear to detriment our survival. And this is essentially because when you look at evolution, you don't see perfection, you just see enough to get by. If the spare resources can be used on other things and you still survive, then that's what will happen. So we only have to survive enough to get by. And that's why we see things that we associate with culture that perhaps are not that useful, in fact might even harm our survival if you look at it on over a long enough time scale. And so I could explain how we come to have culture in broad terms, how we come to have a survival mechanism in broad terms. If you can imagine a group of people, a small group of people surviving by their wits, not having a fixed pattern of survival. It's very difficult actually to imagine this, but it's just a sort of ideal. And then at some point someone works out a way of doing things that usually works, and so therefore everyone decides they'll go along with that way of doing things because it could be a lot easier than what they're doing. Someone finds an easy way to survive and everyone else copies it. Of course they would. Why wouldn't they? It makes perfect sense. And this is what we call, this is the beginning of culture. Now of course this easy way to survive might have its limitations and it might break down at some point, but you don't need to worry about that now, or you only need to worry about it when it stops working. And of course all these little tricks that we've built up over the years as a species have accumulated into various forms of culture. And I have my culture, sort of a Western capitalist culture, democracy as well, to a certain extent. And there's various different cultural elements to my sort of British identity and my English identity. And sort of one of the ideals that we have in our culture is this sort of idea of multiculturalism. In fact, we can allow other cultures to exist, or rather subcultures to exist to a certain extent within our own, maybe with a few compromises. So you can see the phenomena of, in our culture, of subcultures and anti-culture, which is basically a type of subculture. And I have in the past toyed with the idea of creating a subculture, or attempting to create a subculture. Ultimately I just realised that this isn't quite what I wanted. I wanted to think beyond cultural limitations, and that includes anything of my own creation. You can say that language is a large part of culture, and it's certainly affects my ability to express myself, and it also affects people's ability to consume points that I make. If there isn't a concept or a name for it, then it's quite difficult to express it. Now, I'm prepared to accept that inadvertently I might be creating a subculture by propagating ideas which I've derived, or rather have reprocessed from other ideas and other things and experiences that I've had.